At the rehearsal dinner, she whispered, "Before you hear it from someone else." Yes, I slept with him. I just raised my glass and said, "Then let's toast to honesty." When her parents asked what I meant, I showed them. The night was supposed to feel like a celebration, the kind that hums with laughter and the faint clinking of wine glasses under soft yellow lights. But I remember standing near the entrance of the restaurant, watching the guests filter in and feeling an odd stillness under all the noise, like something was quietly slipping out of place. The rehearsal dinner was Laura's idea. She wanted it to be intimate, elegant, a memory worth keeping, she'd said. Her parents rented out a private room at a coastal restaurant overlooking the water, the kind with linen-draped tables and candles flickering in small glass cups. I stood beside her, smiling, shaking hands, thanking her relatives for coming, but my eyes kept catching small things. Her best friend, Grace, wouldn't look at me for more than a second. Her brother avoided conversation. Even her father's handshake felt strangely limp. It wasn't paranoia. It was pattern recognition, the kind that comes from watching 1,000 small lies stack up until you finally see the shape they make. For weeks, I'd noticed things I couldn't explain away anymore. Late-night work meetings. The way her perfume lingered in the car when she said she'd taken an Uber. The locked phone, the sudden change of passwords. Every time I asked something, her face would twist into mild annoyance, like I'd broken some invisible rule. So I stopped asking. I'd found out the truth 2 weeks before this dinner. That night, I'd gone to her office to drop off her coat. She'd left it in my car after a client dinner. Her car wasn't in the parking lot, but the light on her desk was off too. Something in my chest tightened. I decided to wait. Then, when I drove past the next block, I saw her car parked near the apartments behind the gym. I didn't know who lived there at first, but I remembered hearing the name once, Evan, her coworker. I didn't do anything dramatic. I didn't knock. I didn't confront. I just waited. Watched her car lights flicker on an hour later. Watched her get out, hair slightly messy, blouse untucked. I took a photo. Then I left. For the next few days, I gathered what I needed. I didn't need every detail, just enough to make the truth undeniable. Hotel receipts, overlapping timestamps on company expense reports, a picture of them together at a bar after overtime. It wasn't rage that guided me. It was precision. I wanted the truth to surface exactly once, in a way it couldn't be dismissed or spun. So when she told me the rehearsal dinner was on Friday, I agreed immediately. We were seated at the long table by the window, the entire room glowing in golden light reflected off the sea. Her mother was in high spirits, gushing about the wedding venue. Laura smiled, played the perfect bride-to-be, and I matched her rhythm, calm and polite. She looked stunning, but I noticed something different in her eyes, that fragile kind of fear people carry when they know the story's about to collapse. Halfway through dinner, after the main course was served, someone raised a toast to us. I stood up beside her, holding my glass. That's when she leaned close. Her voice was so soft I almost thought I imagined it. "Before you hear it from someone else," she said. Yes. I slept with him. She didn't look at me when she said it. She stared straight ahead, as if confessing to the air. My first instinct wasn't shock. It was clarity, the kind that burns everything unnecessary away. All the tension that had been coiling in me for weeks suddenly went quiet. I looked at her, then at her family, and raised my glass slightly higher. "Then let's toast to honesty." The table went silent, the kind of silence that cuts through laughter mid-sentence. Her father blinked, confused. Her mother's hand froze halfway to her mouth. Grace stared down at her plate. "What do you mean by that, Henry?" her father finally asked. I smiled, the same calm smile I'd practiced in the mirror for days. Exactly what it sounds like. Laura's face turned pale. Her eyes darted toward me, then toward the others. I watched the realization spread like smoke through the room. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing something dangerous underneath the surface. I could have ended it right there. But part of me wanted them to understand. Not the scandal, but the sequence. How trust doesn't collapse in one blow. It erodes quietly, in whispers and missed calls and late-night excuses. Laura's father asked again, his voice shaking now. "Henry, what did you mean?" I turned my gaze toward him, not angry, not loud. "Ask your daughter." She tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. Her hands were trembling. Grace reached for her arm, whispering something I couldn't hear. The tension in the room was unbearable, a perfect, suspended pause. Then, just as the murmurs started, I placed my phone on the table. I didn't play anything yet. I didn't show them the evidence. I just let it sit there, screen down, like a loaded weapon everyone could see, but no one wanted to touch. Laura's father pushed his chair back slightly, his voice cracking. "Henry, this isn't the place." "This is exactly the place," I said quietly. "It's the last night before a lifetime commitment. If we're toasting to honesty, we might as well mean it." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. She turned to Laura. Sweetheart, what is he talking about? Laura couldn't speak. She just covered her face with both hands. I stood there for a moment, watching the chaos build around her. I wasn't proud of it. I wasn't cruel either. I simply let the truth stand where it belonged, in the open. After that, I raised my glass again and took a slow sip. The wine tasted metallic, almost bitter. Then I placed the glass down gently and said, "You all should eat before it gets cold." No one touched their food. Her father left the table first, muttering something under his breath. Her mother followed him, crying quietly. Grace pulled Laura up and tried to lead her out of the room, but she froze halfway, looking at me like she wanted me to say something, anything, that could undo this. But I didn't. I just stood there, motionless, the faint sound of waves outside breaking against the walls. When they finally left, I stayed behind, alone in that golden room full of untouched plates and half-melted candles. I sat down, finished my wine, and looked out the window at the dark water. The calm that settled over me wasn't satisfaction. It was relief, the kind that comes when you stop pretending things are fine. I thought about the irony of it all. How many times she'd told me honesty was the foundation of our relationship. How many times I believed her because I wanted to. The staff eventually came in to clear the tables. One of them, an older waiter, hesitated beside me. "Rough night, sir." I smiled faintly. "No, just an honest one." Then I stood up, straightened my jacket, and walked out into the cool night air. The wind smelled like salt and rain, and the sound of laughter from the other rooms felt distant, like echoes from another life. The next morning, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to beg for closure. There was already a plan, one she didn't know existed yet. And it began with a single file sitting in my phone, waiting for the right moment to play. The next morning, the sunlight through the blinds felt too bright, too precise, like it was cutting the room open. I hadn't slept much. My phone buzzed through the night. Calls from Laura, texts from her mother, one message from her father that began polite and ended in threat. I ignored them all. The silence was deliberate now. By noon, I was sitting in my car outside the venue, staring at the wedding sign that still had our names printed in gold. A week ago, that sight would have filled me with pride. Now it felt like a lie carved into wood. The rehearsal dinner had detonated in slow motion. The guests had gone home with stories to tell. And Laura, somewhere between guilt and panic, had tried to rewrite the script overnight. But she didn't realize something yet. I hadn't shown them everything. The dinner was only the opening act. I'd found out about Evan through a sequence of coincidences that started small. A work email left open on our laptop. A hotel loyalty card in her bag. But what confirmed everything was a security camera across from the parking lot. I'd gone there pretending to look for a lost phone, and the night clerk, a man named Peter, had been happy to help. He didn't ask questions when I offered to pay for the footage. On that recording, I saw her car pull in at 9:46 p.m. Evan's sedan followed minutes later. They entered the building separately, left together 3 hours later. That was enough. In the days that followed, I built my own timeline, hotel receipts, dinner transactions, one photo of them leaving a corporate retreat in the same outfit the next morning. I hadn't planned to use any of it, at least not publicly. But the way she whispered her confession at that dinner, so carefully, so calculated, made me realize she wasn't trying to apologize. She was trying to control the story before someone else could. That changed everything. I arrived at the restaurant that afternoon again, not to eat, but to collect the last of our deposit for the private event. The manager, a polite woman with too much mascara, handed me an envelope and asked quietly, "Was everything okay last night? Your fiancée seemed unwell." "She was," I said. Truth tends to do that. Before I left, I noticed something. The small projector they had used for the slideshow of our childhood photos was still there, unreturned. The manager told me they could store it until the wedding. I told her I'd need it again tonight. I was hosting a short follow-up dinner with family to clear things up. She agreed without question. That night, I sent out a short message to everyone who attended the rehearsal. Something vague. Dinner at the same place. 7 p.m. Need to address something important before the weekend. They came. Of course they did. By 7, the room was half full again. Laura arrived last, pale and trembling. Her father sat stiffly beside her, arms crossed, jaw clenched. Evan didn't show up, but that was expected. He'd probably been told to disappear. I stood near the projector, phone in hand, not smiling. "Thank you all for coming," I said, voice calm. Last night ended abruptly. I wanted to make sure no misunderstandings linger. Her father muttered, "You caused enough damage already." I nodded. "Then let's make sure there's no confusion left." I connected my phone to the projector cable, and for a second, the screen blinked to life. The first image was a calendar. Work trips, dates marked, client dinner. Then a slide. Time-stamped receipts from a hotel 2 towns away. 2 guests. 1 room. Her name on the booking. Gasps cut through the room. Her mother's hand went to her mouth. Laura whispered something under her breath, maybe a plea or a curse. I couldn't tell. The next image was the photo from the security footage. Her and Evan walking out of the building, his hand on her back, laughing. The picture was grainy, but clear enough. I let the silence do the talking. Then, finally, I said, this was 6 days after she told me she loved me. The same night, she said she was working late. Someone knocked a glass over. Her father stood, shaking his head. Turn it off, Henry. This is humiliating. I turned to him. It's truthful. Laura's mother broke down crying. Grace left the room entirely. Laura just sat there, staring at the floor, her whole body rigid, like she couldn't move. Her father's face darkened. You think you're teaching her a lesson, but all you're doing is punishing everyone. I met his eyes, steady. You raised her to think lying comes with a warning label, not a consequence. Consider this the consequence. He wanted to hit me, I could see it. But instead, he turned to Laura, hissed something sharp, and stormed out. When the door closed, I disconnected the projector. The screen went black. I walked toward her slowly, not angry, just tired. You whispered the truth when it was convenient, I said quietly. I gave everyone the full volume version. She looked up finally, eyes red, voice breaking. Why are you doing this? Because you tried to own the story, I said. Now it owns you. Then I turned to leave. As I stepped outside, the restaurant staff avoided eye contact. I walked down the wooden pier behind the building, the sea wind cold against my face. I sat on the railing, staring at the reflection of the lights in the water. I thought about the last 3 years, every holiday, every fight that ended too easily, every compliment that now felt rehearsed. It wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was post-mortem analysis. My phone buzzed again. A message from Evan. Can we talk? I opened it, read it twice, then typed back. We already did. You just weren't invited. He didn't reply. By midnight, the messages stopped. The city went quiet. And in that quiet, I realized something. I hadn't lost anything real. What I lost was the illusion of something safe. The truth didn't destroy my life. It disinfected it. The next day, I made the call to the venue. I told them the wedding was canceled. I also told them to invoice her family directly. I had already signed an amendment to the contract weeks earlier. It shifted the entire financial responsibility to her family side in case of a moral breach or public scandal related to the couple. It was a clause I'd slipped in months ago when we discussed logistics. A backup plan, in case the unease I'd felt ever turned into proof. The manager sounded hesitant. That's an unusual clause, sir. It's a modern world, I said. People protect themselves differently now. She agreed. By afternoon, Laura's father was calling me again. Dozens of missed calls. I didn't answer. He'd find out soon enough when the invoices arrived. That night, I took a long walk by the harbor. The air smelled of salt and diesel, and the sound of waves hitting the dock felt steadier than my own pulse. I thought about how easily everything had flipped, how quickly the words forever can expire. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was correction, the slow rebalancing of something that had been uneven for too long. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of moving out. She could keep the apartment, the furniture, the plans. All of it. I didn't need to take pieces of something already broken. But I did have one more thing to finish, and it would make sure the story reached the right ears. By Monday morning, the storm had already formed without me saying another word. Word of the dinner spread faster than I expected. Her family moved in tight circles, real estate, local politics, charity boards. When something scandalous happened, it didn't just echo. It multiplied. I woke up to 3 new voicemails. The first was from her father, short and venomous. You've humiliated my daughter enough. You'll regret this. The second was quieter, from her mother, pleading for a private conversation. The third was from an unknown number, Evan. He didn't say his name, but I recognized the voice immediately. You think this is justice, man? You don't know what she's been through. I deleted all 3 and made coffee. I wasn't looking for justice anymore. I was just finishing the cleanup. That day, I went to the venue again to finalize the cancellation. The manager had a nervous smile when she handed me the revised paperwork. Her father called, she said carefully. He's not happy about the contract terms. I nodded. I'm sure he isn't. She leaned in a little. You really added that morality clause months ago? People prepare for earthquakes, I said. I just prepared for something smaller. The clause was simple. In the event of any scandal caused by either partner that damaged the public reputation of the event or the venue, the full financial responsibility shifted to the initiating party's family. Laura's father had agreed when I presented the paperwork, thinking it was for PR protection. Now it meant the $58,000 bill was his. By noon, I'd returned my suit deposit, closed our joint bank account, and transferred her engagement ring insurance policy to her name. It wasn't spite. It was neatness. When I got back home, Her car was in the driveway. She was sitting on the porch steps, wrapped in a gray hoodie, face swollen from crying. I considered driving past her, but something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe exhaustion, stopped me. I parked and stepped out. She stood up immediately, voice trembling. "You ruined me, Henry." I paused a few feet away. "No, you did that yourself. I just stopped hiding it." She looked thinner, smaller somehow. "You could have just left me. You didn't have to destroy everything." "I didn't destroy anything," I said. "You wanted to build your life on 2 stories at once. I just turned the lights on." She wiped her face, angry now. "Do you even know what it's like to live under my family's pressure? You don't. They're going to disown me. They should have raised someone who tells the truth." For a long time, neither of us said anything. The sound of a lawnmower from across the street filled the space between us. Finally, she whispered, "I don't have anywhere to go." I looked at her for a moment. Then I pulled the keys to the house from my pocket and dropped them into her hand. "Now you do." Her head snapped up. "What?" "I'm signing the place over to you," I said. "Everything inside, too." She stared at me in disbelief. "Why?" "Because you're going to need it," I said flatly. "The mortgage resets next month. The taxes double. You'll figure it out." It wasn't cruelty. It was consequence. When I left, she was still standing there, keys dangling in her fingers, trying to understand what she'd just been given and what it would cost her. That night, Evan called again. I let it ring out. Then he texted, "You don't scare me. You're just bitter." I replied once, "You'll find out soon enough." The next morning, I sent an anonymous envelope to his company's HR department, copies of the messages between him and Laura, with timestamps showing they were during work hours. The company had a strict non-fraternization policy. I didn't have to wait long. By Wednesday, Evan was suspended pending an internal investigation. The same day, one of Laura's cousins, the kind of person who lives for gossip, posted a vague status online about family drama and betrayal. The comments exploded. Within hours, someone leaked the video from the rehearsal dinner. It spread across local forums and Facebook groups, because that's what people do when they see chaos. They share it like it's entertainment. I didn't leak it myself, but I didn't stop it either. Laura's father called me again, shouting through the receiver, "You think you've won? You've embarrassed yourself too. Everyone's laughing at you for staying with her this long." I almost laughed. Then they can keep laughing. I'm not the one hiding anymore. He hung up on me. Later that week, I started the process of transferring the deed. The notary who came to finalize the papers gave me a curious look as she read through the file. "You're giving her the house outright?" she asked. "Not a gift," I said. "A reminder." I spent that evening boxing up what I needed: some clothes, my computer, a few books. Everything else could stay. I didn't want to carry anything that had been part of our shared illusion. By Friday, I was staying in a small rental downtown. It wasn't much, a single window, a noisy refrigerator, but it was quiet. No framed engagement photos. No scent of her perfume hanging in the hallway. That weekend, my phone buzzed with one last message from her mother. "She's not eating. Please talk to her. You made your point." I stared at it for a while. Then I wrote back. I didn't make a point. I told the truth. Then I turned the phone off. That night, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker below. I thought about everything that had happened, not as revenge, not as victory, but as an equation that had finally balanced. People think betrayal is about emotion. It isn't. It's about math. What you give versus what you get back. I'd given trust, time, and loyalty. She'd given excuses, secrets, and guilt. The sum was always going to collapse eventually. The next morning, I received an email from an unknown address with the subject line, "Apology." I knew who it was before opening it. It was from Evan. He wrote that he'd been suspended, that Laura was falling apart, and that he never meant to ruin anyone's life. He begged me not to send the evidence to the press. I didn't reply. By the end of that week, I heard from a mutual friend that Laura had moved back in with her parents temporarily, though temporarily meant they were making her sleep in the guest room, and her father hadn't spoken a word to her since the video surfaced. The family's foundation lost 2 donors. Their name became a quiet punchline in town. It wasn't revenge that satisfied me. It was silence, the kind that comes when noise finally stops. Before the month ended, I booked a one-way ticket out of state. I didn't leave a note, just a forwarding address for the notary in case there were loose ends on the deed. I spent the night before my flight walking along the same pier behind the restaurant. The same place I'd stood after the first dinner. The sea was calmer now. The lights didn't shimmer as sharply. I felt the kind of emptiness that wasn't pain anymore, just space where something used to live. As I walked back, I passed a group of tourists taking pictures near the railing. One of them asked if I could take a photo for them. I took the phone, lined up the shot, and for the first time in weeks, smiled genuinely. When they thanked me, I said, "Be honest with each other. It saves time." They laughed, not understanding what I meant. And that was fine. I didn't need anyone to understand anymore. The morning I left town, the city looked different, stripped of all the noise that used to anchor me to it. The coffee shop where we met, the park where we took engagement photos, even the small bakery where she used to drag me for croissants on Sundays, they all looked hollow now, like movie sets after the crew leaves. My flight wasn't until the evening, so I had hours to kill. I packed what little I owned into 2 suitcases, then sat in the empty apartment, staring at the pale imprint on the wall where our framed engagement photo used to hang. For a moment, I thought about leaving a note, something final, something dignified. But she didn't deserve the poetry of closure. She'd get the paperwork, not the words. Before heading out, I checked my email one last time. There were 2 unread messages waiting for me. The first was from the venue, a short update saying the outstanding wedding balance had been successfully transferred to the client's family per contract terms. It included the payment amount, $58,412.12, and a note thanking me for professional communication throughout the dispute. The second was from Laura. It wasn't long, but every word carried the kind of exhaustion that settles after denial finally burns out. She wrote that she'd lost her job at the marketing firm because clients had seen the video, that her father had stopped speaking to her, her mother only communicated through short texts, and that Evan had moved out of state after being terminated. The last line read, "I wish you'd just yelled. Anything would have hurt less than silence." I didn't reply. Instead, I took the drive to the airport slowly, stopping once near the waterfront. The air was cool and sharp, filled with that faint metallic smell you get before rain. I parked near the old marina and walked along the edge of the dock, letting the boards creak under my shoes. It was the same place where we'd once talked about our future, the same spot where she'd laughed and said, "Nothing could break us, right?" The irony wasn't lost on me. As I stood there, I realized something that hadn't occurred to me before. It wasn't just betrayal that hurt. It was the months I'd spent living in a script someone else had written for me. Every dinner, every apology, every "you're overthinking it." All of it was theater, and I'd been the one paying for the tickets. I watched the water slap against the wooden posts and thought about what comes after a storm. Not peace, not victory, just rebuilding. Quiet, unglamorous rebuilding. That night, my flight took off under a dark, clouded sky. I watched the city lights fade through the window until they turned into nothing but distant flickers. I didn't look back again. 2 months later, I was living in another city, working remotely for a consulting firm that didn't care about my personal history. My apartment was small but clean, the kind of place that didn't echo when you walked through it. Some nights, when the world went still, I'd catch myself scrolling through old photos, not because I missed her, but because I wanted to remember how easy it was to ignore what didn't fit the narrative. People don't fall for liars because they're gullible. They fall for them because the lie fits what they wish was true. Around that time, I got an email from a mutual acquaintance, Grace, her former best friend. She said she'd cut ties with Laura after the truth came out, but she felt I deserved to know what happened after I left. Apparently, Laura tried to rebuild. She kept the house for a few weeks, then listed it for sale when the mortgage notices started stacking up. She moved into a small apartment above a hair salon, took a retail job at a boutique, and changed her number twice because of calls from reporters and ex-clients who recognized her name from the leaked footage. Grace said she'd bumped into her once at a grocery store. Laura looked thinner, quieter, older. When Grace mentioned my name, Laura just said, "He gave me the house. And the bill." That line stuck with me longer than it should have. A few weeks later, I got an unexpected call from a blocked number. I almost ignored it, but something in me wanted to hear whatever ghost was on the other end. It was her father. His voice was controlled but strained, like he'd been rehearsing what to say. "I'm calling to say we're selling our property upstate. It's complicated, but your name came up during the bank meeting." I didn't understand at first, but then he explained. The wedding's financial fallout had led to an investigation into their family foundation's expenses. Donors had pulled out after the scandal. They were downsizing. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was explaining a chain reaction. Before he hung up, he said, "You're a calculating man, Henry. But I'll give you this, you didn't lie." Then the line went dead. I stood there for a while, phone still in my hand, realizing that in the end, that was all I'd ever wanted, acknowledgement. 3 months passed before I heard from Laura again. Her name appeared in my inbox one afternoon like a ghost surfacing from the deep. The subject line read simply, "Closure." The message was short. She said she'd finally sold the house, paid off part of the debt, and was starting fresh in another city. She mentioned therapy, a new job, and that she no longer blamed me for what happened. She ended it with, "You taught me what happens when honesty comes too late." I didn't reply this time either, but I didn't delete it, because it wasn't really about her anymore. It was about me finally being able to read her words without feeling anything. 6 months after the dinner, I visited that same coastal town for a business conference. By coincidence, the hotel was just a few blocks from the old restaurant. Out of curiosity, I walked there one evening. The place had changed owners. New name, new paint, but the bones were the same. The host asked if I wanted a table for one. I nodded. They seated me by the same window where I'd sat that night. The view of the water unchanged, the hum of conversation eerily familiar. I ordered wine, not because I wanted to relive anything, but because rituals, even broken ones, have their place. As I sat there, a couple at the next table started laughing. The woman was teasing her fiancé about something. A silly argument, probably. But there was warmth there. Trust. The kind of ease that can't survive secrets. I didn't envy them. I didn't pity them either. I just watched for a moment, then turned my attention back to my drink. When the waiter came by, he smiled politely. "Everything okay, sir?" I nodded. "Perfectly fine." And I meant it. On the flight home the next morning, I scrolled through my phone and deleted the old folder, the one that held the screenshots, the photos, the recordings. For a long time, that folder had been my proof, my armor. Now it was just clutter. As the plane began to descend, I thought about how the entire chain of events started with a whisper, a single line at a dinner table meant to soften the blow before it landed. She thought admitting the truth early would lessen the fallout. She never understood that timing doesn't make truth easier. It just determines who controls it. I didn't smile when I remembered her words that night. I just closed my eyes and let the thought pass through like wind through an open window. When the plane landed, I walked out into a new city. No baggage claim, no waiting face, no unfinished story. Just quiet. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone who had been betrayed. I felt like someone who had finally left the scene of a fire after the smoke cleared.